Now, there is little doubt of what Patanjali considered most important if we should consider the number of sutra he uses to illustrate something. For the Yamas and Niyamas, it's Sutta 30 to 45, he spent 15 sutras explaining them and the benefit that it has from being sent to them. Asana, I think he uses 3 sutras. Pranayama, it's 5. Pratyahara, it's 2. Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi is basically 1 each. And then he goes further into Samadhi. But needless to say that Yamas and Niyamas are the kind of core principles of yoga. And without them, there is no stability of the mind for us to experience what yoga is. The mind is pulled by its kind of underlying subconscious tendencies. And there's no greater awareness of that inmost stability that is there. In verse 30, he says, Ahimsa Satya Steya Brahmacharya Parigraha Yama. So the Yama, the personal restraints, is kind of non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, right, proper kind of intimate contact, and then non-possessiveness. These are the 5 yamas. Now, these yamas, ete, says Patanjali, mahavratam, they make up the great vow. For anybody seeking clarity in yoga, this kind of samaya anavachina, they are equal to everybody, okay? Irrespective of jati desha kala, irrespective of your birthplace, your position, your place where you are and the time where you are. It is universal principle that should be followed by everybody seeking clarity of yoga. Now there are people, of course, that need to protect and live their lives as hunters, gatherers, fishermen, etc. There are people who work as within the army and who need to protect the country, etc. And by accident or in order of defense, they might need to kill. But on an individual level, outside of one's responsibility, so to say, one should always strive to avoid violence in any way, in thought, deed, or action. Be truthful in thought, deed, and action. Avoid stealing in thought, deed, and action. Be morally just and chaste in thought, deed, and action. And don't have patterns of greed and possessiveness. That will only cause disturbing patterns within you. And if we go deeper into these yamas, we see that they are basically, yama means to restrain, to not give into. Can any good things come from violence? It takes a long time to build up something and a few seconds to destroy it. And what violence or aggressiveness usually do is that it hurts and it creates separation and it gives pain to people who are subject to it. If we don't have truthfulness, how can we find the greatest source of essence within us? If we don't develop a truthfulness in our own mind, our nature, our thinking, our way of understanding our internal world, if there's no stability and we can't make order of that, there is no connectivity from within. If we steal and cheat, we derive ourselves from developing patterns of our own that we can maintain our livelihood. Brahmacharya, always running for pleasure outside of ourselves, will exhaust us because we're looking in the wrong places. And excessive possessiveness will make us lose ourselves in the external world. So Patanjali later explains about the various bonus factors that come from being established in the Yamas and Niyamas, but I'll come more to that later. Now comes the Niyamas, and he says, Saucha Santosha Tapasvadhyayeshvara Pranidani Niyamaha. The Niyama, which is more like Niyama means special rule, and special rules of observation. He says it's first purity, saucha, santosha, contentment, and then tapas, which is we mentioned in Kriya Yoga, discipline, svadhyaya, self-study, and Ishvara pranidhana, surrender to something greater than yourself. These 5 niyamas, kind of, once you have established yourself in the yamas, once there are less kind of excessive, uncontrolled external pulls of the senses, there need to happen an internal strength that takes place. And you strengthen your mind from developing patches of purity. In speech, word, and deed, in everything you do, if you strive for purity, accepting that we are impure by nature, but striving for purity leads you towards it. Contentment helps you to explore and understand the happiness from within. Discipline helps you experience new things. Self-study awakens your mind, opens new horizons, gives you new perspective. And Ishvara pranidhana brings about the steadiness of mind. And Patanjali says, of course, it's very hard to follow the Yamas and Niyamas. He's not dogmatic. He does not say you have to. It's not a commandment. It's rather contemplate the opposite. He says, vitarka bhadane pratipaksha bhavanam. If you are overcome by the need to be aggressive, lie, steal, and cheat, etc., contemplate the effect of it. Patanjali kind of alerts to our own intelligence and makes us try to understand what is the consequence of lying, stealing, cheating, and being violent. Can any good come from that? And when you contemplate this, you will know and you learn how to restrain these patterns within you for the sake of your own harmony. So he basically, vitarka bhadane pratipakshadhanam, when you are overcome by an inclination to follow, to disobey or not practice or not fall into the pattern of these yamas and niyamas, is pratipaksha bhavanam, contemplate the opposite. And then he explained further what the consequence of not following these yamas and niyamas are. And it says, vitarka himsadaya kritakarita numodita lobha krodha moha purvaka murdumadhyadi matra dukkha gnanantapala iti pratipaksha bhavanam. So he basically says, when you are contemplating to give in to violence, stealing, lying, cheating, etc., if there's an impulse within you wanting to do that, Patanjali says, contemplate the opposite. Because he basically said, if you concede to violence, if you cause violence, he said, krita karita numodita, if it's done by you, violence, etc., if it's caused by you, or if it's kind of accepted by you, it all ruins you. So not obeying the yamas cause our own ruin. Whether we cause it ourselves, or whether we do it ourselves, whether we cause it, or whether we accept it. So he said, krita karita numodita murdumadhyadi matra, even if our impact is slight, middle, or intense. Dukkha gnanantapala, he said, like, the result of them is dukkha agnana anantapala, the fruit of giving in to violence, stealing, lying, cheating, etc. It's endless misery. So he says, practice it opposite. Don't get tricked into being violent, stealing, lying, cheating. Because even if it's middle, slight, or intense, it is bound to hurt you. Now Patanjali is very much aware of the many challenges that it is to follow the yamas and niyamas. Because by nature, we are careless, we are violent. Unfortunately, sometimes we steal, lie, and cheat unconsciously. Some more than others. But if we get caught up into these patterns, we will suffer, and it will be an endless confusion and delusion that continues to rid us. So Patanjali says, vitarka badane pratipaksha bhavanam. When you are bound to give in to violence, stealing, lying, etc., try to contemplate the opposite. Be strong, be a hero, and know that certain things is not going to serve you. Because he says, vitarka himsadaya kritakarita anumodita lobha krodha moha purvaka mrudha madhyadi matra dukkha gnanantapala iti pratipaksha bhavanam. One of the longest sutras and probably the most important ones. He says, and if you give in to violence and you allow that to kind of pull and rule you, he says, if you do it, you cause it, or you kind of accept it. So krita, karita, anumodita, whether you have done it, or whether you caused it, or you kind of accept it, it is bound to cause confusion and delusion within you. Because he says, lobha kroha moha purvaka, the very reason we get engaged in these patterns is due to greed, anger, and confusion. That's what fuels this pattern within us. That's why we become angry. That's why we lie, steal, and cheat. Because we are confused, we are deluded. And we do it slight, middle, or intense. He said the very result of that is kind of endless suffering. So contemplate the result of giving into violence, lying, stealing. Can there be any constructive qualities of good giving into these things? No, says Patanjali.